Hey, welcome to Get the Balance Right, a podcast for creative entrepreneurs and agency owners looking to grow their business in a healthy, sustainable way. I'm Heather Zeitzwolfe, CPA. I serve this community with coaching, profit advising, and virtual CFO services. Please join me as I talk with leaders in digital media, branding, advertising, design, marketing, and SEO. Hey there, welcome to my show. This is Heather Zeitzwolfe. I'm so glad that you're listening to this podcast. So this is the premiere episode. And for this one, I figured, rather than me interview somebody else, I'm going to let somebody interview me, just so you can kind of get to know who I am. I happen to be on a podcast of a friend's, and it's Bryan Cargill who interviewed me. And I was talking about my 10 pitfalls for creative entrepreneurs. It's a handout. You can get it online. It's a PDF that you can download, and that'll be in the show notes. You can check that out. So in this conversation, we kind of dive into that handout that I created. There's some really good nuggets in there, I think, if I could pat myself on the back. But anyways, you can check it out now, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, talking about the 10 pitfalls, maybe do you want to just start with one? Maybe what's your favorite, or the first one in the top 10?
So one of my it's not really my favorite, but unfortunately it's kind of like the starting piece. And that is that I see so many times entrepreneurs, especially if it's just one person, or maybe they have one employee, or they hire assistants or virtual assistants or contractors. But one of the things I see them do is to not keep their books, or if they do keep their books, maybe it's a relative that's keeping their books, or they're using some kind of software that they don't really understand. And really, to grow your business, you have to start with really good books, because you have to have good numbers. Otherwise, you have nothing to base that off of to figure out if you are meeting certain benchmarks, or if you want to track certain KPIs. But I know with working with creative people, not all of them are number people. I happen to be like one of those people that's like creative, and I have a brain for data. I love both, but I understand that the people that I work with may not be in that same case, or they might enjoy the data, but they get really scared by the whole financial accounting piece of it. That's why I don't feel like they should have to do that. Like they should hire someone like me, or a bookkeeper, or somebody to help them with their books. So that's the number one thing, I think. Start with that, and then we can kind of go through the next phase. But if you don't have good books, it's really impossible to grow your company at all.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And yeah, using those metrics, using that data to your advantage. And then, yeah, you talked about why is this a problem in the creative industry? Because a lot of people, they're focused on the creative, they're focused on the art, and hope that things kind of pan out. I think this episode is going to be as much of a talk for myself as well, because, I like to hope that kind of things will fall into place. But I know that there is advantages by looking into KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and using those as a beacon for where you're going to go in the future.
Things that I find with creative people is that the only reason why they're doing their books is because they have to do a tax return at the end of the year. And really, all your finances really should help drive your business, and all the decisions that you make. You want to be able to be, instead of reactionary, be proactive throughout the year. So if the only time you're really looking at your numbers is at the end of the year when you're doing your tax return, that's too late. Like you've already, you now can't, you can kind of go back and look at your history. That does have some, use, but really you should be keeping track of what's going on and then forecasting what will happen. So you really need to know like what's in your pipeline, so you know what kind of cash flows that you're going to have, so you can gauge like, can you afford to bring on a contractor on a job, or do you need to charge more for a job? Or is there a lot of scope creep that's coming in and that you need to like talk to your clients? But without measuring anything, you'd have no idea that all this is going on. You might like in your head kind of like feel it, like it might be a gut feeling, but you don't have any data to back it up.
Yeah, the intuition is there, but it might not be reflective. Maybe you can tell people what are kind of your first steps with folks when, because if you're creative, you can either try doing this yourself, or you work with someone like yourself, Heather, who's trained, who's well organized, who has gone to school for this, who's very good at what they do and finds enjoyment in it. What does that first session kind of look like?
If you want to work with me or, other accountants or whatever, for me though, I do what they call like a discovery session, which would sit down, and right now would probably be done through Zoom for the most part. And I do have an office here in Portland, but I do work with people across the United States. And so we would just do like a Zoom chat and kind of get to know each other. I would look at whatever books that they had, if they do have books, and then we'll see how we can work together. I offer several different tiers depending on the size of the business. So, I understand that some people might be just in the early phase, the bootstrap phase. And so I have a plan that works for that. But then, if you have more employees, and that in itself brings on a whole other slew of issues when you have payroll and all of that. So it's a more higher touch set of services that I have for those people.
That's awesome. So you can kind of help, grow alongside folks as they're at a smaller stage up to that mid-size organization. Maybe we can help people identify what makes you unique, Heather. What's your favorite part about what you're able to offer your clients? I
am definitely different and unique. So I'm not this typical boring accountant. I know that we are sort of stereotyped to be that like buttoned up suit and tie kind of person, and I'm totally not that. When people meet me, they're like, "You're an accountant? Like what?" One of the conversations that I have over and over with people is that they feel intimidated by their accountants, and they feel afraid to ask questions. And they'll tell me that when they've worked with accountants in the past where they've left their office being like, okay, I am so confused. I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know what they said to me. And it makes it so that clients are afraid to ask questions. And one of the big things that I think creative people have is they don't understand their numbers because they've never really been explained how do I even read a financial statement. I mean, it's confusing, and accountants use all kinds of jargon. So I think I bring to the table a sort of a down-to-earth kind of nature that I'm going to work with people, and I understand that it can be extremely confusing, and I want to speak your language. I'm a creative person myself, so I jibe with these people. So they feel like they're my kind of people. And
or people's creative uses for like kind of standard nomenclature for a business. I'm sure you've heard all kinds of things, and that's great. You're able to kind of see people where they're at and have empathy, and you're supportive of where they're at, learning everything. I've used your services, and I've been very appreciative and you didn't make me feel stupid at all, even though I'm sure there are such things as stupid questions sometimes, and I'm sure I've asked a handful of them, but
but I don't think there are any real stupid questions, because to me it's like, if you don't understand something, you should be able to feel comfortable to ask and just verify and totally just make sure open that way.
And just kind of get that clarity. Yeah, I can vouch for you too, that you made me feel you empowered me. I think you walked away peace of mind and empowerment. So,
hey there, this is Heather. Besides being a podcast host, I'm also a CPA and profit advisor. I help creative agencies grow in a sustainable manner. Right now, I'm offering a complimentary healthcare check of your business. So if you go down to the show notes, you'll see a link and you can sign up. All right, now back to the show.
Number one, you have not having enough cash and reserves as something that I think a lot of small businesses struggle with, especially you're seeing the ramifications of that right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So just to be clear, some of the stuff that's on the list, we've actually kind of jumped to inadvertently. But that is actually, after not having good books, this is the next really big thing, because unless you have enough money in reserves, you may not be in business for very long if something happens like a pandemic or even payroll. You could have a lack of something in your lack of jobs coming in. You might have accounts receivable that people have not paid. There's all kinds of reasons why, rent increase or whatever it is, you want to have cash on hand. And when I say cash, I mean like not inventory, not accounts receivable. I'm not talking about having credit cards and a line of credit. You need hard cash. You need
cash is king. Yeah.
Some cash in the bank. And really you need to have at least 3 to 6 months worth of cash. And when I say that, that's like based on your expenses. So if you had fixed expenses, if you still had to pay people payroll and you had no revenue coming in, 3 to 6 months. So you want to look at all your big expenses. Another big expense besides like rent, payroll now is software, because everyone has to pay monthly fees for all their software. So, just kind of looking at all the things that you spend money on each month and just try to set aside 3 to 6 months. And you can also look at your revenue as well as a gauge. And that's like 10 to 30% of your revenue for the year you'd want to have set aside in the bank. So you can kind of use those two gauges.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful for folks. And right now we might be at a stage where people are trying to start building up that reserve again. Maybe they've wiped out their reserve during this time. Would you just recommend, as people are starting to build up their reserve, start like cutting costs on everything, live like really lean? And then once you have about that 3 to 6 months, you might be able. That's the tough part, is that like if you've been living so lean for so long, and then you start gradually getting more subscriptions, more software, it can creep back up to you again. So you're kind of living this balancing act. Do you have any tips for folks there?
Yeah, I think you just never let up on the acting lean. I don't think that you should. Believe me, I see people spend money on all kinds of things that I'm just like flabbergasted how much money they'll spend. One of the things that I see people spend money on that really is not necessary is meals. Like they take people out for meals. They spend a lot of money on meals, or they'll treat their employees. And I understand that. I mean, you want to have an atmosphere that's really fun for your workers. But if you can't afford it, then you shouldn't be doing that. Another thing I see is like wasted software. That's another one. Having a space that you really can't afford, so you're spending lots and lots of rent. One of the nice things about, I guess, the whole COVID thing, if you could say nice things about it, is that people are working from home. And I think that companies are now seeing like, wow, we can actually utilize this in our own business, where it's like, we don't have to have a fancy space that we rent. We can save money on rent and have people work from home. There are issues with that, of course. I mean, there's lots of issues with that, but from an expense perspective, it's a lot. You could save a lot of money. If we're just talking about businesses in Portland, the rent has just gotten just insane. Just think how much money you'd save that. Probably save your 3 to 6 months pretty quickly if you didn't have to pay rent. Another thing would be, as sad as this is, maybe you have to lay somebody off. You really can't afford to have all of your employees. But again, if you're not really gauging that stuff and running the numbers, then you won't know if you need to let somebody go, or maybe you need to hire somebody because you have so much stuff in the pipeline you really can't afford it.
Yeah. And is that kind of where your expertise would come in? Is maybe if someone, hey, we're thinking about letting someone go because we just don't think it's going to work in the budget, or making that decision to plus up your team, that's when they could consult with you?
Yeah, exactly. So I provide monthly reports. I can do all kinds of forecasting, which will look to see, like, can you afford? We can do scenarios where we can figure out, like, put in, like, okay, if you hired this person, if you got these jobs in, what's that going to look like? And
yeah, I think that's great. And I don't know, just for the sake of, because I'm with another creative person, just talking about how visual charting is, I think, important, especially in the creative industry. Being able to visually see any kind of data makes a world of difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. Years ago, to do all this analysis with dashboards and all of that required lots of pieces of technology, Excel spreadsheets and stuff. So I'm able to connect with people's QuickBooks files. If they use Xero, I can connect with that as well, and then run the data that way. And then also I can integrate non-financial data by exporting it from their software. So if it was like some kind of time tracking software or whatever, I can export that into Excel and then integrate that in with my other reporting. And so we can look at KPIs that are financial and non-financial KPIs.
That's awesome. That's great. I think a lot of people probably perked up at that because, beyond the financial, if they have other information that they're tracking, cross-laying that with what they already have out there is meaningful and actually really helpful for organizations.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of these on these softwares that people are already, accustomed to using. Sounds like you're pretty well versed. I know for myself, you've used FreshBooks too is another, but I think you're leaning towards QuickBooks and Xero because of the functionality that those programs provide.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they're just more robust. I mean, I'm not affiliated with any of these software companies, but it's my preference. You could just do a lot more with them.
Yeah. Just jumping around on this top 10, skipping number 2, but going to number 3, I think is kind of interesting and something I think a lot of small business owners struggle with, especially as you first start making money and you want to reinvest. But that number 3 tip is not paying themselves enough as small business owners. So you have some stats here. Do you want to kind of talk about that tip?
Yeah. So the one that you skipped over, though, too, is not setting enough money aside for taxes. Like the one that nobody wants to talk about.
No one ever talks about that until like March, right? When April 15th starts getting closer is when you start hearing about taxes a little more.
Okay, so now let's jump into the third one, which is setting aside enough money for yourself. So here's the thing. Entrepreneurs, they're notorious. It doesn't matter what industry. Entrepreneurs are notorious for not paying themselves enough. They pay their vendors, they pay their contractors first, but then they don't have anything left over for themselves. And granted, when you go to do your taxes, you want to have the lower income as the lowest income as possible, so you pay the least amount of taxes. But really, you want to be getting money out of your business. What you should try to do is pay yourself first. So before everything else, if you can take at least 30 to 50% of your gross revenue, that is what you want to try to do. Now, depending on, if you've got employees, if you're an S Corp, I mean, there's all these different things that will play into that. So this isn't just like a set thing, but just if it's just you, solo entrepreneur, you really want to be trying to get 50% of your gross profit. I know that's really tough, but
yeah.
So what happens?
It gets closer.
Yeah. So what you want to try to do is pay yourself first, and then whatever's left over, then take a portion of that out for taxes, and then the rest is what your expenses should be. So if your expenses are more than that, then you're actually spending way too much on expenses.
Yeah, and I think that you had a sentence or a nugget that I've heard a lot and throughout time is paying yourself first, and that's still especially true in a business as well.
Oh, yeah. You want to pay yourself first. If you're just a solo entrepreneur, that would be a draw from the company. But you can do it like just set the money aside for yourself, put it in another bank account, however you have to do it.
Hey there, this is Heather. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if you are, if you wouldn't mind, please hit the subscribe button now. That way you'll never miss an episode. All right, now back to the podcast.
Just talking about maybe, I think what gets people really excited is like your passion for maybe the creative industry. What do you think brings you over to the agencies? What's the draw there? What makes the creative industry different than a lot of the other industries out there?
Well, for one thing, I'm a creative person, so to me, it's like I talked about, these are more my people. Like I was mentioning, I have a degree in advertising. And so to me, this is just like the perfect niche. And what's different is that you have this sort of dynamic of these really creative people that have usually a real strong passion for being creative, and they want to bring that passion into a business. And a lot of them are very visionary entrepreneurs. And so it's just a more exciting niche to be in.
Yeah, it's easier for them to get creative and visualize the future, right?
Yeah. But unfortunately, one of the things that's on my list, though, is like not having a clear vision. I should probably explain.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I saw that I think that's coming up here pretty soon. But yeah, I would love to hear not having a clear vision. Because if you don't have one, you're kind of drifting out there in the ocean, right?
Yeah. So I think what happens is creative people do have big ideas, but they don't have it like set down in paper, like, okay, what is it really that they want? Like maybe they think like, oh, I want a cool office. I want to have a team of people, but they don't really know like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, really what they want. What you want to have is a super clear vision so you know where you're going, and then reverse engineering how you're going to get there. You might want to have like a big board where you're like thinking about these things, like what's my vision? And then kind of like, okay, chunk it out. So look at, if we work back 5 years, and then 5 years from that, and then what are your goals and how are you going to get to the benchmarks that you've established for yourself? But unless you have a clear vision, you're just kind of aimlessly going year to year, and you have no idea like what you're leading.
I like that. And you kind of talked about like reverse engineering, which has become a little bit more popular term in the last decade here. But yeah, picking out what we are, where do you want to be, and working backwards.
I also mentioned in my handout to have SMART goals. So you want them to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Part of being an entrepreneur is that you are going to fail and you have to be okay with failing. But I think also like having a coach or somebody else that can hold you accountable while you're trying to pursue these goals is a good thing. With an advisor like myself or a coach, somebody that can sort of be there to push you. I
think I read a stat that was like, if you write down your goals, you're like 40% more likely to achieve them. When you have a coach or a guide, an advisor, or someone that's guiding you, it increases up to like 70% more likely because you have someone that's holding you accountable. And then also you're probably able to help them realize what is achievable because you work with a lot of other businesses out there. So you've seen some other models, you see what does work, and you're able to bring that expertise to the table for them. Okay, maybe we can go through one more tip, and maybe we can talk about what's the one thing that entrepreneurs can do to increase their business. But just for the sake of the episode, what's one last tip from the top 10 do you think we should cover?
Put some processes in place. I know that people hate process. It really can help you be more efficient in the work that you do, especially if you've got a creative firm and you have new hires and you want to have good utilization and all of this. And really, you have to have a process and recording those processes. And now with video, though, it makes it so much easier to record processes because you don't have to do like boring flow charts and all that stuff. You can actually just record a video of all the steps to do. And it really does help new hires to get on board a lot quicker. Everybody should do it the same process. If you come up with a good way of doing something, new hires shouldn't be like coming up with their own method of doing something. If you know the best way that's most efficient to do it, then you should have some sort of process. And I've just found that, if it's written down, people probably just put it in a log and then put it on a shelf and they never look at it. But with video, it's a great way to train new people, and at least it's engaging and you can pause it and watch somebody do a task. And most stuff is done on a computer anyway, so you can just do a video of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always a big fan of video. I think, it is engaging. You can do voiceover and you can talk to the audience and really slow it down. Because sometimes if you just have like a flat sheet with the instructions, sometimes they miss like a little detail that takes you from one instruction to the next. So the video, you're able to really just see that in real time and like I said, pause it.
Yeah.
Well, anything that we haven't covered, Heather?
We did talk about KPIs, and I just really think that it's super important to be proactive in your business rather than reactive. And like I said, the only way that you'll know that is if you keep track of your numbers.
This has been great having you onto the show. Talking about, I think you do bring a new light to financials and make it really fun and easy to understand. And your own personality shines through when people get to work with. They're not just working with any regular old person. They're working with you, Heather, which you provide a great experience for people. Heather, thank you for bringing the energy, the enthusiasm.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
Hey, this is Heather. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. If you found value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a rating on iTunes or just simply tell a friend about it. And if you're interested in learning more about my profit advising and coaching, please set up a discovery call by using the link in the show notes. All right. Thanks so much and see you next time.